Good evening, and welcome to a benefit for the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament. My name is Michael Tisrin. I'm one of the 700 marchers. These people didn't know each other 5 months ago. Not too many of us did. A lot of people share a lot of feelings about nuclear weapons and respond to them in different ways. Some people get angry. Some people are afraid. Some people write letters and vote. Some people demonstrate in the streets. And tonight, we can share in the collective vision. Two of the members of Collective Vision, one of the bands that is formed on the Great Peace March. I guess we got started back in the desert.
In Barstow, where the march had stalled for about a couple of weeks. Pro Peace folded, and during the reorganization time when we became a grassroots movement of people, a bunch of different task forces formed for taking care of different things that needed to be done to get the march on the road. While that was going on, one of the things that happened was we got together playing music.
I think Daryl was the first person to start it. Daryl and Bo and Michael went ahead to Las Vegas to do advance work and started working on some music while they were there, and started going into churches and schools and doing outreach with the music. At the same time, you and Doug and I think, met each other at the big festival we had in Barstow, and I remember that night we went up on the bluff to watch the sunset independently. All three of us happened to be up there, and there happened to be a guitar, and we started singing as the sun was setting, and it was for
magic.
me, it was very magical. Some of the most beautiful harmonies I'd ever heard, just like they were meant to be there, like we were meant to sing together. And we left for Vegas a couple days later, I guess, to go join the other folks.
Hooked up with Daryl and Bo and Michael.
Trace was there at the time.
And Jay came somewhere after that, somewhere around
Boulder, I think.
Yeah. It was before that. He was from Boulder. He came out, I think, around Utah and started playing with us. So I remember the first time he played with us was at a concert in Cedar Springs.
Cedar City, right.
Cedar City, Utah.
Right.
And then John just started playing drums with us maybe a month ago.
There's been so many transition stages in the band, both people coming and going, new kinds of material being written, and it seems like we're constantly testing our perceived limitations and usually going beyond them, doing different kinds of music and finding different arrangements and combinations with the musicians. singing in all different kinds of places, parks and bars and churches.
Detroit was really our first concert hall kind of setting. At St. Andrews, we played in a hall that was set up to be a concert. That was another stretching for us
really
to get
exciting.
A new situation.
We had some really good equipment, and another local band joined in to help us out. It was good to see the kind of support in a city that the march hadn't even entered or wasn't even going to enter. Michael, one of the band members, is from Detroit, and he went ahead and did a little bit of promotional and advertising work, but it seems like Detroit handled the rest by itself and gave us a really good show of support. Not just at St. Andrews, but also by coming down to march with us the following day.
Mm-hmm. Some real good news coverage of that.
Excellent coverage. I feel extremely fortunate and blessed to be a part of this group. I'm part of the march, and especially a part of what's become Collective Vision, because I think music is a very universal language that tends to bring out the humanness in everyone, and I think the nuclear arms crisis is a universal problem. So I see the two being very connected, and I see the music as being a really positive way to deal with that and communicating with people.
Yeah, it really goes beyond a lot of the words. I think that in a lot of ways it's more effective than the rallies we do, and it's different anyway. It's effective in a different way. For us to be able to go out and share what we believe through music is a real treat to be with such an incredibly gifted group of folks who are not about doing music for a big me or for the attention that we get from it or anything, but in a true sense coming from a real pure space with it, of doing music about things that we believe in. And it's magical how it's worked out for each of us to be here in this group. And I'm real tickled to be part of it. It's a treat.
No, I gotta walk out the rage that wells up inside. Gotta walk with the power of the spirit guide. Gotta walk till this world has come around. And the peaceful true justice is common ground, common ground. Common ground, common ground, common ground. Common ground, common ground, common ground.
Hi, my name's Michael Krieger, and I'm from Southfield, Michigan. I'm on the Great Peace March for global nuclear disarmament, and I'm also a member of the band Collective Vision. We're a band that formed on the Peace March. We came together somewhere in Las Vegas after having been on the road from Los Angeles, and discovered that we had a lot of people in the band with musical talents wishing to express their message for peace and nuclear disarmament through music, and that's been the most effective way for me to get my message out. I've been wanting to make a statement about nuclear weapons for a long time, and was feeling probably like a lot of people hopeless about how huge the problem seems to be and how little effect people seem to be able to have. And then about a year and a half ago I saw an article about this peace march that was starting in Los Angeles and going all the way to Washington, D.C. And I knew right away, as most people on the march did when they saw the ad, that that was something that I was going to do. Regardless of what family and friends said, a lot of them supportive, a lot of them thought I was kind of crazy for doing what I was doing. But something inside me said this is the strongest statement you can make at this time about wanting to take down nuclear weapons. The march has been anything but what was planned, but I think for a lot of us that's been the saving grace. It's become a people's movement, a grassroots movement, and the best effect that we've had, I think, is not necessarily in putting direct pressure on our politicians yet to make changes, but in making the people of the country aware that there are a lot of people out there that feel the same way that they do about nuclear weapons, about the spending that we do, that there are enough people out there that are upset about lack of funding for all kinds of programs that we see as essential, such as schooling and housing and food for people who need food, and clothing for people who need clothing, and that we're all pouring it into these weapons that are hopefully never going to be used. And plenty of us see that as obscene and intend to do something about it.
Basically inherently unstable design system. That's why Bessie is something that we're worried about. The reason that that is so is that the water pressure system that's used in the B&W reactors is very sensitive to transients of pressure and temperature. It's designed that way in order to very quickly convert nuclear power into steam power to create the electrical energy. There is an efficiency gain by doing it that way. Bessie is more efficient than many of the other nuclear power reactors, and it's not really very efficient at boiling water. Its efficiency is less than 60%. The efficiency of a good designed gas or coal system is 60 to 80%. Bessie is not even that, but it's better than most. Okay, because it's more efficient, it runs at higher pressures and temperatures, and it runs more effectively, but it brings with it its own risk. And the risk is to blow all to hell. And when it goes, we go with it. There's no way to stabilize that design without sacrificing efficiency. And if we sacrifice efficiency, that's the very design feature that they are capitalizing on. You might as well get a different design. In fact, that's what you have to do. That's precisely the argument about changing Davis-Bessie. The other argument, of course, is that since it's prohibitively expensive to change Davis-Bessie, the best thing to do is to decommission her and forget about Davis-Bessie altogether. There is a very subtle and diabolical relationship between nuclear power and nuclear weapons, and it's one of the things that drives the nuclear power industry, and they are absolutely adamant about the absence of this subtle but very definite relationship. The fuel rods, the spent fuel rods, from time to time leave nuclear power stations to be recommissioned. What does that mean? It means that they are taken to a spent fuel rod storage depot, then to a spent fuel rod recharging plant. And what is recharged is the cladding is removed, the pellets are ground up, and a chemical reaction is gone through to separate uranium from plutonium. The plutonium goes away from the plant, not in fuel rods. The uranium is then repacked, re-enriched with U-235, and shipped back to the nuclear power station as new fuel rods. The key issue is the plutonium. Plutonium-239 is the nuclear fuel for nuclear weapons. And it turns out it's the torch for hydrogen weapons as well. That's the subtle but definitely between the two. The nuclear power industry denies that, but the other thing that you have to understand is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not the only institution that's in charge of these nuclear reactors. The DoD, Department of Defense, is also in charge of the nuclear reactors.
Heard about the weapons and the technical end of it. Now I'm going to tell you the emotional end of it. So bear with me. I'm very ill myself, and I'll try to speak up. You want to speak? No, I'm fine. Thank you very much. I read of your approach to our area, and it struck me rather odd but appropriate that your story was on the obituary page. Was it interesting? Yeah, it was very apropos. I caught your article on the obituary page. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the 1946 atomic test in the Marshall Islands at Bikini. People magazine did an article on the 40th anniversary of Bikini. This is the tribute to, out of 40,000 men that went to Bikini, 28,000 are dead. This is the tribute they give us. a nuclear bomb. The desert breeze raced across the desolate mountain basin, casting aflutter the flags raised by the dying who gathered there to mourn for the dead. A young woman in black who came to pay tribute to the dead was all the while wondering how many more Memorial Days would pass before she went to join them. She is a victim of an atomic war that she never faced. Her father watched two atomic blasts as this nation tested its newfound might 40 years ago. He was 54 when he died, and now his daughter, riddled with illness at the age of 32, seems destined to follow. A small band of men who witnessed the birth of the atomic age gathered on this site, Yucca Flats, Camp Desert Rock, where many of the tests were conducted to memorialize their dead and to demand once again governmental acknowledgement that an array of crippling ills were caused by atomic radiation. Former servicemen from Britain, Canada, Australia joined their U.S. counterparts in a 2-week pilgrimage that included stops in 15 cities and ended in the scorching heat of the desert sun just across the mountain from the site where many of them watched the awesome mushroom cloud obliterate the landscape. Out of the 40,000 men, 28,000 are now dead that we know of. I have just visited my husband's grave, a fairly new grave, as he passed away June 29, 1982, at age of 54. The American flag was flying over his grave as he was a veteran who served in the Navy during World War II and the Korean conflict. As I stood there, I knew in my heart that my husband was a casualty as much as the men who fell on the fields or died at sea. He was a victim of radiation exposure during the atom bomb testing at the Bikini in the Pacific of 1946. He served on the USS Botany APA 235. I can recall his telling of holding his arm over his eyes at the time of the A-bomb blast and being able to see through the bones just as an X-ray would show. He told of other happenings also which coincide with facts which are now being uncovered as more men who were exposed to radiation are dying at an early age from unusual causes. My husband's battle with health began at age 40 when his immune system no longer could function and he could not fight the infections in his body. His blood became abnormal and had a severe obstructive pulmonary lung disease took over his life. He suffered tremendously until his death last year. Also, our daughter has lost her reproductive organs, her bladder, her gallbladder, part of her colon, and has inflammation throughout her body with unusual blood patterns. Statistics show that children of atomic veterans who were exposed to radiation had defects of this kind. And yet, someone in the government and Navy higher command years ago told my husband and many other servicemen that they should partake in nuclear testing. Also, they were told to pay no attention to any suggestions that there would be radiation problems to the men and to their offsprings from the participation of the bomb tests. So it was done, and many men who served at the bomb sites have left widows behind and children who will have severe health problems and perhaps little future. I know many servicemen have perished and have been rightfully recognized as heroes. But what about the men who were involved in nuclear testing and have had continual suffering as my husband has had? He served his country well. Yes, he gave his life in a painful way. I also feel a widow's pain and despair, and so very strongly feel that his sacrifice and that of others involved in the bomb test should be recognized and appreciated. After all, I feel certain he gave his life as an atomic veteran. I love him, I miss him, and I had to tell someone. Thank you for listening. That woman is my mother, Catherine Bilo. She's the widow of the atomic veteran I spoke of. The reply she got from a president's aide was enough to make you want to vomit, and I didn't want to bring it out here. I have no respect for our present administration whatsoever. This is a speech I would like to give in this question. It's getting dark, and I don't want to take up any of your time. We are here in honor of the men, women, and children who were and still are being sacrificed on the altar of the atomic age. We are sick and we are tired. I myself have had 56 surgeries, and I'm 32 years old, and I have more surgeries on the way. Everything from my waist down has been removed, and now I'm going to lose my right kidney, and God knows what goes on after that. Old age will not probably be a luxury to me. The governing powers may have fooled us once with their lies, but God help us, they will never fool us again. I am not going to stand by and watch our Mother Earth be raped by her own governing body. We are not going to take it anymore. I want to see my world and its children live to see their children live. I need to hear the laughter of children and hope to always live up to the trust in their eyes. But there is a boogeyman in our midst, a silent killer that strikes without provocation or conscience. This unseen monster reared its ugly head more than 40 years ago, and we are not going to take it anymore. The gentle, proud people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki will live in the belly of this beast for eternity. The world shall join together into one body to bury the monster that prevails over us all, and bury with it the governing bodies that keep this monster well fed. These men, these dangerous court jesters of doom, shall be buried with this obscenity. For when we bury the filth of radiation, then and only then do we bury along with it hate, sickness, death, war, and suffering. Let us not forget our fallen, but turn your eyes to a non-nuclear world, a legacy of peace and health, a legacy 1,000 or more years from now, we can look back on it and say, thank God we listened, thank God we learned, thank God we did not take it anymore. Thank you.
The sun appears to say, get up, get up, get out of bed and start the brand new day. The breakfast is cooking, it's gonna be so good. The morning's calling you, and I think that you should get yourself up, get yourself up, get yourself up, yeah, and start the brand new day. Get up, I know you may be tired, but it's time to motivate.
I'm the mayor of Peace City, and my name is Diane Clark. I was drafted to be mayor on March 1st, 1986, when we were just struggling to become a mobile city. I'm the mayor of a city of about 680. We have all facilities, from our own schooling to government to sewers to a performing art theater. We certainly do care about our city, but it's not the main emphasis of this march. The main emphasis of this march is to create a movement for global nuclear disarmament. The city is formed around that and to suit the needs of the marchers. But we do have a lot of fun in Peace City, and Peace City moves, as the marchers do, about 20 miles a day from town to town across America. And in each town we celebrate the coexistence of the marchers, who represent 50 states and about a dozen foreign countries, and whatever town it is, if it's a big town like Chicago or a little tiny town that was only a third our size, Crook, Colorado, we're still glad that we are practicing nonviolence, which is a discipline within itself, and we're processing the principles of peaceful coexistence. We're trying to be peace pioneers, to say there's another way to deal with people without having a whip in your hand, that the old days of might is right are Neanderthal thinking. And it's my job, it's a wonderful job, to meet mayors, as I have all the way across our trail now, and to present them with our simple wooden key to Peace City. As mayor of Peace City, I've been accepted at many official meetings and gatherings. One of the very, very most memorable ones was at the Hyatt Regency in Chicago for the 3rd annual Mayors Conference of the World. The mayors from all over the world met there, and I was invited, as we are an honorary member of that association. And each mayor at the Get Acquainted luncheon stood up on a podium and announced their city, and usually its key phrase, and received a round of applause. And I felt a little bit out of place, since I represented more a conceptual mobile city than Paris, France, or Lima, Peru, when I stepped up. But I explained that I was the mayor of Peace City. I represented 650 marchers who were walking the earth until global nuclear disarmament was achieved. And I heard the applause start, and I was amazed because the whole room rose to its feet. Hundreds and hundreds of people rose to their feet and applauded the concept of people caring enough to be marching for disarmament. I think that was the most thrilling moment of my life as mayor of Peace City.
Keepers of the flame, well, the newspapers say we're all gonna pack up and go our separate ways. They paint a picture of us helpless in the Mojave. Say we're gonna just throw the dream away. Yeah, but you know it's bigger than that. Keep your heart open, you know where it's at. Cause the spirit adventure we're on, yes, this adventure needs each and every one of us to keep it strong. Cause you know we're carriers of the dream wheel. Vision seekers, keepers of the flame. Keepers of the flame. We're carriers of the dream wheel. Vision seekers, keepers of the flame. Keepers of the flame. We're carriers of the dream wheel. Vision seekers, keepers of the flame. Keepers of the flame. We're carriers of the dream wheel. Vision seekers, keepers of the flame.
I started in Los Angeles March 1st. Been here ever since. Gonna be here all the way to Washington, D.C. I don't think I'll go any further than that. I know some people are planning on going to Florida or a southern route back to the West Coast. And I think that'll be enough for me, November 15th. The march definitely has gone through some evolution. And the evolution is continuing. And it has a lot to do with, I believe, what we've learned about what it actually means to be a peaceful community. We go around saying, hey, we're Peace City. We really believe in peace, we care about peace. Well, if that's the case, we've had to make a transition from outside society, which obviously doesn't put too much priority on peace, to what we consider to be a truly peaceful community here in Peace City. So there's definitely been some transformation, and it's been a trial and error process, learning what you can get away with, what pisses other people off, learning what pushes people's buttons, just trying to get along with each other. And we're not to the point where we can say we're living in harmony yet, but it's I feel we're just getting closer all the time and learning more and more what it is to be peaceful, to be a peaceful human community. I personally believe that you can go ahead and take the bombs down, but someone is always going to know how to build nuclear weapons, so if they're of the mind to do it, they're going to do it again if you take them down. Or if you take the bombs down, they're going to replace them with something else like Star Wars, the laser systems, whatever. In other words, there's the underlying attitude, the philosophy of living, and living together and living in coexistence, which I feel is necessary for us to actually be effective in any type of disarmament or moving towards a world beyond war. And that's something that's an idea that has just been reinforced in my own mind continuously, that we do have to attack the underlying false attitudes in order to solve the problem.
I've been so struck by the likeness of Moses leading the people across the desert to the Promised Land. That part of Exodus, that whole movement of people, there's a whole book of the Bible written about that, and unless you are attached to someone or you happen to be in the locale exactly where you all were passing through, you don't hear much about it. And I think it's a real something that is newsworthy to show people that there are people moving forward toward this global disarmament, and doing it in a way that they're speaking out, and in a peaceful way.
But it's going to have to come from the grassroots. I think we've been dilly-dallying around long enough to know that it's not coming from higher sources. Mm-hmm.
This is Marcher Gordon for WQO 1630 AM, the voice of the Great Peace March for global nuclear disarmament. And the first song of today is dedicated to Tony the filmmaker.
I'm walking forward. Keep on walking forward. Keep on walking forward. Never turning back. Never turning together as one, a band of believers, living out our heart songs. Our collective vision is strong. Healing this beautiful earth that we dance upon. We dance as a road for the dreamers, a road for the dreamers. Walking through our towns and fields, we dance as a
I like the piece. You're coming. There's a marching people. Did you walk to America? I got these. Did you walk to America? Stay right. Wait, did you walk? Excuse me. You're not gonna fail. We're gonna go. Wait for it.
Hi. Hey, aren't you nice to come out and visit with us? Wayne wanted to come over and say hi to you. She's a peace marcher also.
That's Jack. Why don't you guys tell them what you're telling us? Tell them why you think we're walking across the country.
For peace.
What else?
And a war. For no more wars. We don't want anybody to be that. We don't want anybody to die.
You just sign it and send to me.
Yeah, you guys are always going to have this. You guys want to keep these?
One of the things that we do on the Peace March is we try to do a lot of outreach programs. The outreach department on the Peace March has grown considerably from the early days, and it's become really well organized. Some of the things we do is we talk in schools and churches and everywhere we go, in each town that we go into. There's a program called Marcher in the Home, in which people from local towns can take marchers in and for an evening, and the marcher stays in the home and eats there, and it creates an exchange back and forth between the communities and the Peace March. That's the most important thing that we do. Also, there's a lot of one-to-one contacts with local people in the various towns that we go through that is, I think, incredibly important. It's the effect that we're having, I think, is in many ways going to be a very subtle effect, an almost unmeasurable effect on this country, because each person that we reach can in turn reach another person and another person. And it's interesting when you see someone you're talking to go through a change from feeling helpless to feeling that there's something that they can do to change the world around them, to change the politics of their own country, which many people feel apathetic about, and a lot of times the apathy is just born from fear that that government is too big and the arms race is just too huge of an issue for an individual to deal with. And they see the march, they see people walking across the country, and they feel empowered by that, and they'll start talking about their fears about nuclear weapons and about the political situation of the world. We try to find out about the various peace groups and get in touch with them in the different areas that we go through, so that when we meet people, they have access to phone numbers, addresses, organizations that already exist near them that they can plug into and get involved with. We encourage people to write their senators and congresspeople, write the president, write everyone that they can. One thing that's happened since we've been on the Peace March is that we've ended up learning as much from people in the local communities we've gone through as we have taught things to them. And we're learning the stories of the people in the various areas we've gone through. They come out to the march, they tell us about the local power plants or weapons plants or the depressed economy, and it's been a mutually educational thing for us.
My name is Kimberly Voigt, and I heard about the Peace March from the Los Angeles Times. I read about it months and months before we joined. I read the article, and it talked about 5,000 people walking across the country in support of global nuclear disarmament, and it sounded incredible to me, and I showed it to James, and we just decided to go. There was not even really a question about it. It was just almost as if it was a clarion call. It just seemed compelling. We were compelled to go on the Peace March. I remember about 3 weeks ago or a month ago, I was walking along, and it was like an 18-mile day, and it was pretty hot. It was fairly rural. I was kind of, I think it was Iowa, or it was Illinois. And I was getting kind of depressed. I felt that we were walking and no one was really paying attention. And I was kind of, it was one of my down days, and we were walking to a priory, which I believe is a type of Catholic school where nuns live there as well. We were walking into the priory, and I saw in front of me a whole line of sisters, of nuns, and there was probably about 50 or more nuns. And I was walking along, and each one of them was holding me, and they had tears in their eyes. And one sister in particular was holding me really tight, and she was saying, "Bless you, you're blessed, you're blessed." It was incredible because I felt really depressed, and this whole line of nuns just brought me right back to what we were doing. That it's very important what we were doing. It was probably one of the most moving things that has happened to me.
Oh, really?
The main thing I've learned on this march is that we absolutely must learn to live with each other. And we must learn to tolerate difference, because I now see that the reason we have nuclear weapons and weaponry and wars and boundaries is because we can't tolerate difference.
I guess that peace covers such a vast thing for me that it's kind of hard to break it down into what it means for me, but it's something that I feel that each one of us can come to within ourselves, and as we do that, that's what will become a reality out before us. So as I cross the country here on the Peace March, that's one of the things that I try to speak to people with is inner peace and thoughtful thoughts that are for peace and changing the energy in the world and things like that. And of course, everyone's pretty much aware right now what could happen if there was a nuclear war, so I don't talk about the nuclear subject in ways of facts so much, but just trying to get people to realize that one thing that each one of us have to do is stand up and find peace, work for peace. I really would like to see a peace movement. I don't think I'll ever stop working for peace until I see it as a movement, a way of life with all the peoples on the earth, not just an organization here trying to convince people of something, but when it's in everyone's heart. I would like to see everyone just lay down every single thing they're doing and walk toward their capitals and walk toward the people who hold the power of war and things like that. And to me, that would be a movement, because until the people stand up and lead, the leaders are never going to follow what our heart's desire is. And I was so determined on that when the great pro-peace had its problems in Barstow, there were so many of us that were just really wanting to go on, and I really, really wanted to go on. I wasn't really sure at the time just what way it was that I wanted to go on, but it came to me at that time to join a group who would talk to people on the march and would make that the important part of the march, not necessarily getting to Washington, D.C. on the 15th and expecting them to lay down their arms. Even if there were 2 million of us, I don't know that that would be enough. But so my whole, I guess, gratification or something of this march is coming across and speaking to so many thousands of people about this, and finding out that there are so many people who want to do something but just aren't quite sure how to do it. And that's what I, with my friends here, we're part of a group of 13 who decided to go off and talk to people in those ways so that we could feel that we were doing the best we knew how. And we call ourselves the Peace Waves, and I guess we reach little ripples. That's the latest joke anyway. And so we travel a little different route than the big march. And
one thing that I find is, like this weekend I was saying that I was up in Detroit for a wedding, and you know, I found all weekend people coming up and saying, "You're walking for me, you're walking for me," and I feel like that's really something that carries us through, that feeling of that there's so many people who who were taken with us. And we picked up some mail before we left to go to the wedding, and there were some letters from people we'd met along the way with photographs. This one people sent photographs of their house and with an open invitation to come anytime and stay as long as we wanted, and stamps to stay in touch, and just the generosity we meet on the road, and the sense of we're doing something that's a lot bigger than just those of us with our feet on the road. And also, one of the things that happens for me then is that I have to figure out a way to let people know and to talk with people about what they're doing at home and how important that is as part of building this movement, that it's not just those of us who can pick up and leave for a year, that we've been doing this exercise, we just started doing it, called a drop in the bucket, where everyone writes down something they do at home for peace and throws it in the bucket, so you can see that a drop in the bucket might not feel like anything, but you have enough drops, you fill up the bucket and it overflows. So that's a lot of what it's about for me.
Well, I've been walking with both groups. I've walked for the major part of the experience with the Great Peace March, but I have a lot of friends on the Peace Wave, and so I joined them just prior to my birthday in July, and have walked with them for a couple of months and plan to pick it up again in Pittsburgh. I find that the difference between the two groups is very small, except between it kind of compares to a big city and a small town. But I found on the Peace Wave that instead of doing just outreach like once a week in a school or a talk to a church or whatnot from the big march, on the Peace Wave you're doing outreach every day, because people stop by on the highway, they stop and talk to you in the towns, they know they know you look different, and they know that the Peace March isn't coming through their town, and so they're interested in what we are and who we are and what Peace is, and for the most part, they do support what we're doing. So it's a different kind of experience. It's a close-knit group of 13 people who travel together and live peace together and work out their problems on a day-to-day level. And I knew from the beginning, when I first joined the Great Peace March, that it wouldn't be getting to Washington, D.C. on November the 15th that was the important thing in this adventure. It was the process across. Not only the process of interacting with people along the way, but also the process of interacting with each other in Peace City or on the Peace Way, and how that fit together. Because I think that you have to learn how to live it in your heart and on a day-to-day basis before you can live it as a nation. And this is just a small segment of our nation that we are living. And so we have to learn how to live it in order to teach it, in order to have it, in order for the powers to be. One of the questions that is asked most is, well, we surely respect you for what you're doing, but we don't think it's going to do any good. Or, well, what about Russia? Why don't you go do this in Russia? It's the Russians that we can't trust, you know. Sure, they've said they'll have a test ban, but do we really know that that's what they're doing? We can't afford not to be stronger than they are. And I say that to them, that somebody has to start somewhere. And that nuclear weapons are only a symptom of a greater thing, of a greater fear and hatred and mistrust and greed and envy that we have with each other. And that's not just between nations, that's between people. That's not just between us and the Russians, that's between competitors in a town, or family members, or siblings, or friends. It happens everywhere, and until we can get rid of that in our own hearts, then we'll have it in the world forever. So we have to work on that small town part as well as the big picture. One of the greatest moments for me, I guess, I can never tell a story without crying, so I guess you'll just have to put up with that, was when the Great Peace March crossed the Missouri River between Nebraska and Iowa. We took down the flags in the middle of the bridge, and we sang songs. And somebody looked up and said, there's a white dove. And sure enough, I looked up, and there was this white dove that had flown over the bridge, circled back over the Great Peace March before it went on its way. And if I ever had any doubts as to why I was here, or if there was any purpose for my being here, or any purpose for the Great Peace March to be at this place and that time, I knew at that moment that, yeah, this was the place to be, that we were blessed by the universe to do what we're doing. And it was and is a really neat place to be, and neat to think that I'm a part of this great movement across the country that is waking people up to think about peace at home as well as on a national level.
Thanks, Sarah.
One of our inspirations, I guess, for this Peace March has been Peace Pilgrim. One of the things that she said is that she wanted to live simply that others might simply live. And that's been a motto, a way for us as we've been walking across the country. We've simplified our life more and more and more, have cut our expenses almost in half, just by keeping that as a focus, not by sacrificing, but by continuing to focus on living simply. Some of the clarity that came through that, for that to me, was going through Iowa and seeing the fields and fields and fields of corn that were really essentially a liability because the farmers didn't have any place to store it. They didn't have any, there wasn't anybody who could buy their grain from them. At the same time, a friend of mine was getting letters from Nicaragua talking about people who are living on rations and really don't have enough to eat, and really started making the connection that peace and justice are the same work, and that as long as there are people in the world who are hungry, and we are continuing to put a lot of our money in, as a nation, and focus into creating more ways of destroying ourselves and others rather than feeding others and doing it in a life creation way, that there's not peace. And that's been one of the most potent things for me is making that connection.
In my journal somewhere in Nebraska. I'm walking alone with 200 people, and it is hot, and I have not slept well in weeks or bathed in days. And my physical discomfort is only surpassed by my mental discomfort, as problems and mistakes and pain have clouded my spirit over. But I keep walking, and I wave automatically, and I smile mechanically as the cars pass by. And I've been flipped off and cursed at too many times today for the black mood I'm in. And I see a dark blue Buick drive by, and the farmer and his wife in the front seat sit grimly, jaws set, eyes averted, stone-faced with hostility. But I glimpse in the darkness of the back seat a pale figure, alone, a farm boy perhaps 12 years old, and he is shyly but deliberately raising 2 fingers, showing the peace sign to me. And it is then that I know the reason we are walking out here in the middle of nowhere, and the reason is that this is not nowhere for the pale farm boy. It is a home and a life that neither he nor his parents want to see perish in the futility and finality of a nuclear war. And I believe if to this day I had seen only this one sign of support, I would not choose to change our path, because that one boy could touch 1,000 lives in his lifetime, and the millions like him could reach 1,000 each. And that is the very foundation of my hope for this march, and my hope for this planet.
talking loudly now. I ain't gonna push you on my side. Talking about no, 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 no.
I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.